What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Rink Rat Report podcast. I'm your host, Jason Cooper at Takes by Jay. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter at the Rink Rat Report podcast. In case you've been living under a rock for the past weekend or you were off at a cottage with no reception, Craig Berube is officially the 32nd head coach in franchise history. Yes, the Maple Leafs have signed Craig Berube to a 4-year deal. Not sure exactly what the AAV is, but got to assume it's somewhere over $3.5 million. I guess that's what he was making over at St. Louis. Doesn't really matter, no, but interesting thing to look at. A couple things before we get into the show today. Obviously, we're going to discuss the press conference that just happened. We're recording this on Tuesday, May 21st. Press conference earlier today. A couple interesting little snippets, a couple interesting clips from the press conference that I thought were cool. We're going to dive into. And then, just kind of talk about our reaction to Berube as that next head coach, what the coaching staff might look at like next year. So if you're new here, drop a like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Going to get into everything Leafs related over this off season. Let's just dive right into it. And I first want to start with the process of the Leafs getting Craig Berube here. I mean, according to 32 Thoughts, Elliot Friedman said the process moved quick. It felt like it moved quick. The Leafs, I believe, lost their game 7, and then almost right away on the Saturday and Sunday after Sheldon Keefe was fired, which I believe was the 11th or 12th, the Leafs interviewed Berube, flew him out to Toronto, talked with him. And then on the Monday, Tuesday, 13th, 14th, Tom McClellan was interviewed. And then finally, Gerard Gallant was interviewed on Wednesday. All of them flew out to Toronto. All of them were considered, it seems like. But of all the available guys, I wasn't too interested in Tom McClellan. Gerard Gallant, maybe you could have convinced me. Berube seemed like the best available guy at the current time. So yeah, we're here now with Craig Berube. I believe he signed on the 17th. It's 21st today. So very, very quick process, very quick turnaround. I mean, it took us, what was it, a week to decide on that. Before we get into it, though, I do want to say it was interesting, the announcement of us signing him. It seemed as though it came, well, it did come right after, almost the day after. It was the day after, Rob Brind'Amour and the Carolina Hurricanes got eliminated from the playoffs. I wonder, again, this is me speculating, I wonder if the Leafs approached the Carolina Hurricanes about Rob Brind'Amour and instantly got shut down and quickly turned to Craig Berube. I hope they did that because I really think Rob Brind'Amour is a fantastic coach. I'm curious to see if we get any news on that over the coming days, but that doesn't matter now. Our head coach is locked in for 4 years. Who knows? And who knows how long he'll stick around for. So far, not many coaches have lived off their first deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So let's just get right into it. The first thing I wanted to look at and first thing I want to discuss, I mean, Craig Berube was introduced today at the press conference, like I mentioned before. We're going to pull that clip up on screen. And yeah, take it away, Craig.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Brendan, ownership for giving the opportunity to be the Maple Leafs head coach. It's a huge honor, obviously. Great franchise, original six. I had the opportunity to play here for a little bit way back in the day, and it's nothing but first class here in a first-class organization, and I'm very honored to be the head coach.
All right. Seems like Craig Berube is happy to come join the Leafs. And I mean, who wouldn't be? We got a great organization, great staff. We will spare no expense with them, which is really important. General thoughts on Craig Berube. Again, I don't know how much you can take away from a coach. I feel like a lot of what you need to know if a coach is good or not happens behind closed doors. Really, really important, the dynamic between players, really important with how he's able to control a room, really important with how he's able to motivate players. I listed off 4 things that were important to me, and I ranked them in order in our previous episode. For a head coach, at least for me in the NHL. Number 1 is motivation. I think that's the most important thing you need as a head coach in the NHL. Craig Berube, to me, passes that with flying colors. He seems like the type of guy who can motivate a room, seems like the type of guy to build good relationships, build strong relationships, and foster a good environment, I think, for, I want to say trust maybe, or just vision, right? I've always believed that a coach is your general. He's leading you to war. He's leading you to battle. And I know some people might scoff at that, but it's true. That's really what a coach does in the NHL. And you need to have everyone behind the coach here if you want to have a successful successful team. And that's what I truly believe. Not to say that Sheldon Keefe wasn't that, but I really think Craig Berube, that's of all his strengths, and from what I've read about him, that seems to be his biggest strength. So I'm happy about that. Number 2, 3, and 4 for me. Number 2 is player development. Don't really know much about that. Gonna have to take a look at St. Louis, how they've been able to develop their young players. Number 3 would be tactics, and number 4 would be it's slipping my mind right now, but it's not as important as the other 3, so that doesn't matter. Anyways, but yeah, biggest thing for me is motivation. I think Craig Berube is a great motivator, and I think it's going to be really on him to motivate this team, because I feel like that's what a lot of people feel like this team has been missing. That brings me to my next point, the next little clipping that I'm going to bring up here. Craig Berube was asked about holding players accountable, and I think that's something that I think a lot of people in Toronto feel like hasn't really been the case. I feel like we've done an okay job of holding some players accountable. Like, we don't really know what happens behind closed doors, right? So if benching a guy in the playoffs, if you feel like he's not playing well, I don't know if that's the best strategy to hold a player accountable, because again, you're trying to win games. But yeah, anyways, gonna bring this up here, and here's what Berube said about players being accountable.
In a positive direction while doing so.
Well, first, to hold players accountable and for players to understand the accountability, you have to form a partnership throughout. You know, I think it starts in the summertime, getting to know these players, them getting to understand what I'm all about and how I'm going to coach and how I'm going to coach each individual and the team. And, you know, so then when you have to hold a player accountable for whatever, and it could be ice time, it could be whatever the situation is, they understand it more. And communication is huge. And I think one of my strengths is I'm a great communicator with my players. They know where they stand. You know, I'm going to tell them when they're playing well. I'm going to tell them when they're not playing well. I'm going to tell them if things that need to be improved upon. There's all types of things. So accountability is accepted almost by your players when you have that partnership.
I think those are great points brought up by Craig Berube here, because again, like, people just think accountability is like benching a guy or whatnot, but no, it's the basis of accountability is building a trust between a head coach and a player, or just a trust between two people. And that's where the accountability comes in. I'm sure behind closed doors, a player might not play well, and hey, we don't see it optically out in the public that a player is not being held accountable, but privately he could be being held accountable. And I think that's really been a problem from Leafs Nation, is that they want public accountability. But again, this team has no obligation for that. The coaching staff has no obligation for that. And on top of that, it feels as though public obligation should kind of be like a last resort here, because with just the way that people run away with things in the media. So anyways, it was really interesting to see that communication is a big strength that Craig Berube feels like he has. And that's his kind of path to holding players accountable. Again, I feel like communication is key. Communication is everything. Motivation is everything. And I feel like those two things go hand in hand together. Next thing I want to bring up is Berube talked a little bit about his vision for the team, how he wants the team to play. I had a couple issues with how the team played in the playoffs this past year, and I feel like it's something that our team has struggled with. I feel like our team played. I don't know how to put this. I feel like we don't play as run and gun as we should. We have some really good players in transition, maybe not this past year, but in previous years we've had really good transition players, and we're kind of shoehorned ourselves into playing like a dump and chase style of game. I'd like to see more north-south style of play, run and gun from this team, because I think they have the pieces to do so. But before I bury the lead, I'm just going to let Craig Berube say what he was going to say about. I think the thing that he talked about here was being a heavy team and how he wants to implement that, number one, and two, the philosophies of how he wants the team to play.
Play a north game. We want to play fast. We want to be a heavy team. When I talk about heaviness, it's not, running guys through boards and fighting and all that stuff. Listen, the game's changed, but you still have to be strong on pucks. You got to win puck battles. Those are priorities for me, and just playing predictable and north, and playing as fast as we can. Structure is huge. And we got to have structure in all three zones, and that's going to be a priority. We want to play a north.
Structure in all three zones, that's a priority. I'm curious to see what type of structure he plays. But again, for me, the biggest thing here was talking about the north and fast game, because I feel like that's something that our teams really lacked in the playoffs for some odd reason. I don't know if it was by design by the coach or if not, but it really feels like we were struggling to get zone entries. We talked about this in one of the previous episodes where the Leafs were dumping in the puck so much. So I think they were dumping in the carrying in the puck like 20% of the time, which is something in the playoffs against Boston, which is something you only see from a team that's making a concerned effort to dump the puck in, right? They weren't trying to gain the zone with possession. The Boston Bruins were just making good blue line stand-ups. The Leafs chose to do that. And that's something that I had a problem with. I believe Corey Snyder over on Twitter at Shutdown Line had a great post about that. But yeah, that was a problem for me because I feel like the team is better off getting the zone and gaining the zone with possession. So yeah, there's that. And then also what he said about playing heavy hockey. I agree with it. And I think it's the smart way to go about things is that it's not about nailing a guy to the boards. It's about playing physical but smart, winning puck battles. And that's where the heaviness comes into play. So I'm happy that there's going to be an emphasis on the team winning puck battles, the team winning pucks in the corner. I hope that doesn't lead to a dump and chase game because I don't know how successful that will be for this team because I don't think it works. We've seen it before. I feel like it doesn't work for us in the playoffs. So yeah, it's really interesting to see an insight onto how the team is going to play. We don't really know much yet. And maybe we're going to have to do some research over the summer to kind of see the style of play that the St. Louis Blues played and kind of extrapolate that and see how it would work with the Leafs. Last thing I want to bring up from the press conference here, I thought it was hilarious. Turns out Craig Berube and Brendan Shanahan got into a fight before. So here's Shanahan's little story about that.
Video of you and Craig dropping the gloves back in the day, making the rounds over the weekend. I'm curious, what are your memories of playing against Craig, and what stands out to you about him as a coach?
I remember that one in particular. When I came in as an 18-year-old, I was playing in the bottom six and playing a lot against Craig. And then about halfway through my second year, I got put on the first line and doing really well on the first line. And Craig came up to me at the end of a game and said, well, I guess you're not going to fight us guys anymore. And I said, let's go. And at the end of the fight, I said, you know what? He might have had it right. Maybe I should stop doing that.
Video of you.
I thought that was a great little moment from the press conference in case you missed it. So yeah, that's pretty much it from the perspective of the press conference. I don't feel like there was that much said, that much to do. Some other things, if you're interested in checking it out, like Berube kind of got into his history as a coach. Not too many questions, and also not too much you can extrapolate from that situation. There's also another question about goaltending. I mean, like, the guy literally just started his job. I'm sure he signed pen to paper, took his kids, family, whatever, hung out in Muskoka, did something for the long weekend. Like, I don't think the first thing he did was dive deep in. That's what this week's going to be for him. So, yeah, I thought it was a whatever press conference. There was a couple cool little clippings from it, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Next thing I want to talk about though is Craig Berube's time as a head coach. And this is kind of what I'm getting into and why I'm a little bit worried about the Leafs bringing him on. He seems like a good guy. He seems like a good motivator. And it could be a lot to do with the team that was under him. But Craig Berube, other than really, let's just zoom in here, just pulling up his hockey DB, he's been in the head coach for two separate teams. He was head coach for the Flyers and head coach, obviously, for the Blues. The 1 year he was the head coach with the Flyers, he kind of jumped on mid-season, really at the start of the year. They made the playoffs that year, lost in round one. Next year, he was out of the playoffs, and he ended up getting fired. And then, obviously, we know the second time he became head coach, again, joined mid-season. Joined mid-season. Was it about, I don't even know when it was, halfway through the year, I guess. And they ended up winning the cup that year. And that's good. Like that was awesome to see. The roster wasn't the best roster that they could have put together. St. Louis Blues weren't the best team in the playoffs by far, but they managed to pull it out on the back of a hot goalie in Jordan Binnington. So yeah, other than that though, this is where I get worried. He really only has, outside of that playoff run, he has one series win in his 7 years of coaching. Obviously, it's not fair to take away that one playoff run because that matters. But again, only one series win as a coach. You could say talent, but I don't know. It might be talent. I couldn't tell you. That's the thing. I really couldn't tell you. But I that's the only thing that makes me skeptical about Craig Berube is that we've only seen him really have one successful season. And that was when he joined midway through and off the back of a hot goaltender. Now, does that mean that I think he's not going to be a good head coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Absolutely not. For me, as a head coach, the biggest thing you need is a good motivator. And I think he is that. I think he's a great motivator. I don't know where his weakness lies. It could be in tactics. It could be in development. I'm not sure. I don't know what happens behind closed doors over at the St. Louis, over with the St. Louis Blues. But for me, that's something that I'm a little worried about. One thing that I do enjoy is that he seems to be a hard but fair head coach. Someone who is going to push you, but push you in a fair way. And that's something that I really like and something I really value. And then again, I'm sure you've all seen the speech circulating Twitter, circulating X of him giving that his Game 7 speech. Stark contrast to what we saw Sheldon Keefe give in our Game 7. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he gets a response out of players, how he gains the respect of players. I doubt we're going to see it out in front in the public's eye, but yeah, that's pretty much it with regards to Craig Berube here. One more thing I want to get into is, for me, this is going to be like a football reference. So if you've watched football before, if you constantly follow the NFL, there's a coach. His name is Dan Campbell, and he is, in my opinion, one of the best head coaches in the NFL. And he's not good at calling plays. He's not an offensive genius. He doesn't call the plays defensively. What he does is that he's a really good motivator, and he's almost like a CEO of the team, right? He does a really good job of motivating, creating bonds with players. And then the other stuff like tactics and game plan and preparation, he divvies that up between his coaching staff, right? The Detroit Lions have one of the best offensive coordinators in the league in oh my gosh, his name is slipping me out. Anyways, that's what I want the Leafs to do here. If I was Brad Treliving and if I was Craig Berube, I would say, Berube, you obviously have a great eye for motivators. You're obviously a great motivator. You understand how to motivate people. Let's bring in guys who we feel like are good on building up schemes on the power play, can build good offensive, how we want to play structure in the offensive zone, how we want to play structure in the defensive zone. Let's get guys in and focus, make that their main focus as the assistant coaches. That's something that would interest me, because that's what I think can lead to the best, I guess, coaching staff. The best coaching structure is that kind of hierarchy where the head coach is a motivator, but also the CEO to organize everything. And then everyone else, the assistants, kind of do their part in offensive scheming, defensive scheming, game planning, power play, penalty kill. That's what's important. So it's going to be interesting to see over the coming weeks who the Leafs are looking at from an assistant perspective. There's been tons of rumors swirling. This is from the CJ show, that Mark Savard might be coming in as a head coach. That's a little bit sticky. He was assistant coach. He was the assistant coach in St. Louis, taken on the power play in 2019, 2020 as Craig Berube's assistant. But he is signed to I believe, he has 2 more years with the Calgary Flames. And on top of that, I didn't watch the Calgary Flames this year. Their numbers definitely got worse on the power play from last year to this year. So to me, that is kind of like a red flag of like, hey, maybe this isn't the best guy out there for you to get on the power play. And then also there's a lot of smoke, according to CJ, that DJ Smith might return to Toronto as a assistant coach. Remember, he was the assistant coach for many years under Mike Babcock before he went on to the Ottawa Senators. He was the assistant coach in charge of the defense. So it's interesting to see what if DJ Smith is going to come back. He might be in contention for LA. We'll see. But yeah, DJ Smith might be making a return to the Toronto Maple Leafs over the coming weeks. Other than that, it seems like a lot of the head coaches might be open. Maybe Mike Van Ryn could stay. He was another assistant with the Blues during the Cup run with Craig Berube. Also mentions he's not sure what's going to happen with Guy Boucher on the power play. I mean, just based off of his performance and based off our power play performance in the playoffs, I'm not sure how you could bring him back. And he also expects Manny Malhotra and Dean Chenoweth to move on. So that's a little snippet from CJ and the assistant coaches. There's not really a lot of meat on the bone here for this week. Not really much to talk about. A lot of speculation going on in Leafland. None of it very concrete. But yeah, if you stuck around so far, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel because we got a lot more videos coming your way throughout the entire offseason. Comment down below as well your thoughts on Craig Berube signing. What do you think of him? Do you think he's a good head coach? What do you think he's going to do for this team? Do you think he will be better than Sheldon Keefe? Do you think he'll be worse than Sheldon Keefe? I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Follow me at Takes by Jay. Follow the Rink Rat Report podcast, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.